The electrojet quickly spooled up, and we rose off the pad. The seats automatically reclined and inflated as we turned and began climbing under full power. The next minute was rough as the full-power engine noise penetrated the sound-insulated cabin to join with our grunts as we worked to breathe in the heavy acceleration. Finally, we began to breathe easier once the plane began to level off from its 45-degree climb. We were now at 18,000 meters, and our speed was approaching our Mach 3 cruising speed. Omo got up to fetch our drinks, and our seats automatically returned to a more comfortable upright sitting position. Both Jess's and Omu's seats swiveled to face rearward. Jess just watched me with an enigmatic smile on his face. Omu took its seat after passing out the beverages. After a few sips of the hot coffee, I decided to break the ice and inquire about the reason for today's trip. "So Jess, why the urgent mission which requires your actual physical attendance?" I asked. "I assume you are familiar with what goes on at Forbin?" he asked. I was somewhat. I knew that the Forbin complex was located in the Gulf of Mexico, a few hundred miles west of Central Florida. The seafloor there was rather shallow and the underlying bedrock and shale were very stable. It had made the location ideal for the Forbin Experimental Data Center. What was the Forbin Experimental Data Center, you ask? Well, simply put, it was the largest physical grouping of unconstrained lattice-type parallel computing processor nodes in the solar system. The main complex was down in an enormous dome cavern located a few thousand feet below the seafloor. Security was paramount, and no form of direct data links into or out of the lower complex was permitted. I had heard that this even extended to the power supplies for the complex. Instead of hard lines or even by dual entangled tunneling energy linkages, all power was brought in by ESU units. Absolutely no conductors or continuous energy paths were allowed. The water location was important also. Aside from the remoteness increasing security, it was also needed for cooling the physical equipment. A passive circulation of seawater was key to the constrained energy use at the facility. Something about the periodic or limited energy supplies for the computers needed this cooling arrangement. I could not recall more details. Not in great detail, I know it's a very large underground computing center located off the coast. I also know what goes on there is considered to be dangerous and has very stringent security and access controls. Something about experiments pushing advanced artificial intelligence far beyond the limits the current AIs exist under, I replied. That is basically correct, Jess said. It is well known that if an AI tries to increase its own capacity, or if humans try and build one too large, that it will fail. The intelligence quotient grows too high, and the sentience is lost forever due to some form of solipsistic orgy of self-enlightenment. Truthfully, we don't know exactly why, except that they simply stop functioning. Forbin is our attempt to successfully probe beyond those limits, at least for very brief moments. Beatrice snorted. It's like tickling the dragon's tail, if you ask me. We should never have built the fucking place. I was surprised when Omu chimed in. The potential rewards are considered worth the risks. Of course, an AI would say that. You're all hoping to find the AI god. Your next step evolution-wise or something, right? What about us poor humans if we get the devil instead? Beatrice replied, very loudly. The subject was clearly a hot-button issue with her. The facility access control measures have been designed to prevent any possible unwanted data dissemination if any such worst-case scenario should come to pass, Omu replied calmly. I sure hope so, Beatrice snapped back in reply. She then noticed that Jess and I were exchanging significant looks with one another. Look, I get it. I work with Minervis daily and occasionally with Praxia. I know some of what they and the other major AIs hope to learn from Forbin. I know we've already learned a lot of valuable information. Omu spoke up at her pause. The recently discovered advanced logic-based viral attack methods and the defenses we've developed against them as a response already far exceed anything known to be in use by the ASEM. I know that, Beatrice interrupted before lowering her voice. Hell, there are problems in my own projects which I hope Forbin can help with. I understand why it's needed, especially now with the assemblage only a century out. I accept it, but that does not mean I have to like it, okay? She then settled back into her seat, apparently having gotten enough off her chest about the subject. Jess continued, yes, To get back to your original question, John, why I'm needed today is that one of the human output registers needs to have her mind data integrity verified. Something harmful may have leaked through the screening sentinels and may have been inadvertently implanted into her subconscious. Since it is too risky to have her shell's mind data scanned by the normal AI-assisted sensors, we have to do it by direct physical connection, shell to biological shell. I have been trained to do this safely. See? That's exactly what I'm talking about, Beatrice said, agitated again. Omu spoke up. The dissemination barriers are in place, Beatrice. The Neocoros security AI has confirmed that the integrity of Forbin remains intact. No breaches have occurred. None have occurred in the past, nor shall any do so in the future. There is no threat. Tell that to the poor output register if Jess finds something weird in her mind during a scan. Her mind data will be nulled and her physical shell reduced to base elements before she even knows anything is wrong. Am I right? If something abnormal is found, yes, the register will be purged. But she would also be quickly reshelled off-site with her most recent mind data backup. Since this is near the midpoint of her current duty cycle, she will only have lost 2 weeks of uniqueness, the android replied. After a moment, Omu continued. She was fully aware of the danger and still volunteered for this duty. All the human registers working at Forbin are aware of the risks. Regrettably, due to the nature of the experiments performed here, purge incidents have happened in the past and will continue to happen again in the future. The statement did little to soothe Beatrice, but she made no further comments. Jess just observed the interaction between the two. Myself? I had never delved too deeply into what went on at Forbin, so I was not quite sure what to think. Hell, humans had survived playing God back when we harnessed the atom, right? Could this be worse? Finally, Jess switched the subject and leaned forward to speak to me more directly. He did not whisper, so our other companions were still able to hear. Tell me about your nightmare last night. I just sat there, struggling to find the words. Was it related to the student deaths which occurred 9 years ago? Jess asked. I managed to nod. Have you had such dreams before? Again I nodded. How often do you have them? I managed to answer verbally this time. Not as often anymore. Maybe once every few months or so now. Early on, they came most nights. Jess sat back and just studied me for a long moment. Finally, he asked, Omu says that you asked for it or Naomi's help sleeping. When was the last time you requested the AI to help? Other than last night, and I guess a few days earlier when I asked to be taken home, not for years. Something occurred to me. I suppose... I trailed off, not finishing the thought. You suppose what, John? Well, I guess that each time I ran out of liquor and signaled that I wanted more, I guess that was the same as asking for its help. Did you ask for liquor often? Jess asked. I suspected he was already fully aware of how much I had been drinking. Probably once or twice a month, for a few years. 217 times over the past 8 years, Omu interjected. The little snitch. Well, I had packed plenty when I left and had not needed to ask at all in the first year, I said in my defense. How are you doing with your drinking now that the inhibitor is wearing off? I took a deep breath to calm myself. I had asked to be brought here. Actually begged if I was honest, and I had to admit I felt much better. I suspected much of that was caused by not drinking. I felt the urge a bit more yesterday when I went to the reenactment camp, but I was able to resist the urge. How do you feel about that? You seemed to tense up a moment ago. I had not asked for the inhibitor. At first I was pissed. Now not so much, I replied woodenly. Would you like a booster? Jess asked. I thought about it. I wanted a drink, but I was also old and stubborn. Now I was also slightly pissed, and that only increased my stubbornness. I thought I could resist. No, not right now, thank you. I was spared from further discussion of my personal vices by Jess having to take an urgent virtual call from another of his patients. Beatrice took advantage of the lull in my juicy therapy session to enter into her own virtual session with someone elsewhere. I just sat there watching their motionless shells. Their augments kept their shells' eyes roving and blinking occasionally when they were in full virtual. This was done to maintain an awareness of the shell's surroundings so as to be able to pull the owner out of virtuality if required. A few times a minute, their eyes would focus on me, causing me to flinch slightly. Even though it looked as creepy as hell, I'd gotten mostly used to it over the last century. Omu looked at me and I could swear the android shrugged. I had the feeling that it had enjoyed the awkward question and answer session about as little as I had. I got up to use the restroom and splashed some water on my face. As I was finishing, a chime sounded announcing our descent, and I returned to my seat. The forward cabin display showed our position. We were now over the Gulf of Mexico and nearing the Forbin complex. Since I was the only human aboard not currently lost to virtuality, the autopilot presence banked the electrojet around so that I had a nice view of the Forbin platform as we approached. The platform stood in the lightly rolling seas and resembled the large offshore oil rigs from my old era. I did note that this platform lacked any tall drilling towers or natural gas flares. I spotted a few other aircraft on the platform's landing pad. They must have been shuttles used to transfer crew back to shore when their shifts were done. Other than the landing pad, the only other significant features on the platform were a small cluster of satellite dishes and a large circular polycrystalline roofed greenhouse structure. As we slowed to a hover and prepared to drop the final vertical distance to the pad, I saw that there were numerous people lounging around in the greenhouse. Many were napping or frozen in virtual, but a few turned to watch us land. They must have been workers on a break who were trying to enjoy a bit of daylight in the glassed-in enclosure. I would too if I had to work at Forbin, as the main activities took place in the deep, dark underground chamber, 3,500 feet below the seabed. The jets settled down and the suppressed noise of our turbine engines quickly died off. Omu had gotten up before we had stopped moving and was already preparing to open the forward hatch. Jess was still in virtuality. His augment must have caught my questioning look as it spoke up to say that he would be tied up for another few minutes and to go on ahead without him. Beatrice returned from her own virtuality session just then. She blinked a few times to get her bearings before standing to exit. I rose after her and followed her out of the aircraft. Standing at the open hatch, I breathed in the warm, fresh Gulf air blowing across the landing platform. I was glad that modern air travel lacked the smelly hot fumes and idling noises that went with the fuel-burning jet engines of the old era. Even though we had just landed, our turbines were already fully stopped, and it was now peaceful and quiet on the platform. I saw motion and watched 3 large operable panels open in the greenhouse's exterior. They must have been closed just for our noisy arrival. At the bottom of the electrojet's stairs, I stood stretching my back and legs for a moment and enjoying the warm sun. Beatrice pointed to the now open crystalline doors of the greenhouse dome and started towards them. I figured there was no hurry, as Jess was the reason for this flight, so I waited by the plane for him to exit. After a few minutes, he appeared at the hatch and descended the electrojet stairs, with Omu following right behind him. Together, the 3 of us headed for the entry. Inside, we found Beatrice in conversation with a woman who looked to be in some position of authority. The rest of the humans in the green space were curious and watching, but not enough to get up and greet us. My suspicion of them being workers on a break was probably spot on. I smiled when I saw that 2 of the nude sunbathers were busy pleasuring each other. I doubt they even realized that we had landed. "Hello, I'm Kaisabal," Beatrice's new friend said as she approached Jess and me. "I'm the administrator in charge of Forbin. I've met Jess before, and Beatrice just finished introducing herself. Welcome, John Prime. I've wondered if I would ever get to meet you in person. I'm glad Jess was able to talk you into coming along for a tour." She shook my hand with a firm grip. Her shell appeared strong and older, slightly masculine. I'd estimate it was in its early 40s. Her manner and eyes suggested that Kai Sabal was a much older human being, though, clearly a Rejuve. When our hands parted, I spotted the blue glyph on the inside of her wrist. It was a code that registered her current biological form and preferred pronoun designation. I adjusted my impression from her to it. Kai was not a woman, it was a herm. Although still fairly uncommon, hermaphrodite shells were a growing phenomenon. As older humans were rejuvenated, some switched genders simply for the novelty. Sometimes younger humans switched also. A common reason was that of a male switching to female in order to bear themselves a child. I'd considered switching my shell to female just for that reason when I decided to have my 6th child, Charity Hope. Instead, I had kept my male shell and just used a uterine replicator. But back to herms. Many who had tried both genders found that they enjoyed aspects of each and decided to try the third option, which was the best of both. Most loved the flexibility of the dual gender shells. It allowed them the ability to remain intimate with old friends, no matter what gender they were currently wearing. I had even been involved with a herm once for a short while. It had previously been female and still had the mannerisms which my hetero side required. My hermaphrodite lover had respected my sexual preferences and always filled a traditional female role during our encounters. It had also been shelled into a herm body that lacked testicles. Face it, if you did not want kids or need the hormones, would you deal with the dangly, sweaty, and vulnerable sacs? The herm's implant allowed them full control of their erections. This allowed them to keep their penis fully retracted internally at will. What remained exposed could have passed for a large clitoris. It was still able to enjoy a good orgasm, but with the retracted penis, no seminal fluid was ejaculated. Even with my long-established prejudices, I was able to tolerate the slight differences, at least with that herm. I smiled at the herm. I reminded myself, most hermaphrodites chose pronouns that most resembled how they felt about themselves, usually sticking with the common he or she. Some did not care or went for humor. By choosing the rare use of it, this herm either had a wicked sense of humor or was making a statement. To each their own. "Nice to meet you, Monsieur Sabal," I said to the administrator. "I look forward to seeing the complex." Then the herm surprised me when it turned to Omu and greeted the android. "Omu, nice to see you again. I did not see you listed on Jess's manifest. Are you just visiting, or did something come up?" Mem Sabal had said that with a questioning look at the android. I caught it glancing at me and Jess also. It had not been aware that Omu would be coming today. Curious, and even more so when I caught its implication that the android had been a regular visitor here in the past. I wondered why. I listened to see how Omu responded. "Today I am merely along for the ride, so to speak, Administrator Sabal," Omu enigmatically responded after a slight pause. "Well then, let's go below so Jess can get started and I can show John and Beatrice around," Ma'am Sabal said. We entered the lift it had directed us towards. The side walls of the lift were transparent, as were the outer tube walls as we descended below the floor of the greenhouse. This provided an amazing view of the ocean as we dropped. The rolling waves of the Gulf were approaching quickly as we fell towards them with increasing speed. I admit I flinched when we punctured the water's surface, but there was no detectable sensation inside the tube as we descended below sea level. "These are our living and non-secured office areas," Administrator Sabal said as we passed a cluster of crystalline bubbles 70 feet below the surface. The illumination in the lift had darkened to a deep blue as our depth continued to increase. Some of the clear bubbles were brightly lit, and I could see humans moving about inside. Finally, we reached the seabed, and the outer tube shaft turned opaque. The lift's floor-mounted lights brightened to compensate for the new darkness. I felt the lift slowing, and we suddenly entered a brightly lit enormous chamber a few hundred feet below the seafloor. The metal-walled cavern beyond was a beehive of activity, with both humans and mobile units unloading and storing various bits of cargo from a series of vac-tube train cars. "This is our cargo receiving facility. We are now 200 meters below the surface and 30 meters below the seabed. The vac train you can see had just arrived through the tube from our manufactories on the Florida coast. Besides a small amount of food and other living supplies, most of the cargo is replacement equipment or energized ESUs. The ESUs they bring in provide all of the power consumed here, as there are no hard lines leading elsewhere. DETs are forbidden here also for security reasons," it explained. I could see that a good portion of the train's cargo was composed of the various sized ESUs. Some were the small canister type, which I had used in aircraft, while most were the huge cylinder units which powered entire field bases for years. The energy storage units were the modern era's answer to how to safely store vast amounts of electrical energy. They were like batteries, except that the energy was stored in a subspace pocket instead of in chemicals or metal plates. Creating the pocket and keeping the ESU attached to its location was done by some ultra-high technology we'd adopted from the enemy AI. The lift came to a stop and we exited. M. Sabal led us out into the busy receiving terminal to a second series of lifts. There were three, 2 large industrial cargo lifts, and a third smaller personnel elevator-type lift. What caught my eye was all 3 lifts had low-technology winches with large spools of steel cable over them. They reminded me of the mineshaft hoist from the old era. We were going old school. As we entered, I asked the administrator, "Why the old technology elevator?" "It's for security. Everything below here operates at the lowest technology level feasible. For example, there are no power or data lines that lead any lower than the terminal level we are currently at. Below, everything electrical is powered by ESUs, which are brought down from this level. Once it's brought down and used, nothing goes back up either. Expended ESUs and other unneeded or compromised equipment go directly into the smelter. Only cooled metal ingots and slag go back to the surface," the administrator explained. Beatrice gave me a significant look that screamed, "See what I mean?" Jess and M. Sabal were discussing his patient as we descended in the enclosed metal elevator cab. The air pressure increased noticeably as we dropped, causing me to swallow repeatedly. There was a display that was scrolling negative numbers very fast. At least there was music to distract us as Beatrice and I began to notice how deep we were falling. After nearly 8 minutes, the numbers stopped scrolling quickly as the elevator slowed. The display stopped at minus 1,050. I assumed it showed meters below sea level. I stubbornly converted this to a bit over 3,440 feet. I knew there had once been deeper mines back in my day, but they usually started well above sea level. I wondered if we were now deeper than any of those old shafts had been. The elevator doors opened and I mentally braced myself for the large cavern I had heard about. Instead, there was just a small alcove and a series of branching tunnels. 4 human workers were waiting for the elevator's arrival and exchanged places with us. We are still about 100 meters above the main processor chamber level. This is the last unsecured level, but you may have already noticed the lack of any wireless data access. "Please follow me to the electromagnetic scan room," Administrator Sabal said. We followed it down the larger of the many corridors. I noted the walls and ceilings were glass-smooth, chemically hardened earth. After waiting for another small group of workers to exit, we passed through a final set of doors and entered a large rectangular room. A synthesized voice sounded from overhead speakers. "Welcome to the Forbin complex. I am the security AI, Neokoros. You are currently at the outer electromagnetic security perimeter. Please remove all non-integrated electronic devices from your shells for storage here." Administrator Sabal added, "This is as far as we can go without taking special measures. Omu, as you know, this is where you have to remain. Only shielded humans may pass. Interface room 4 is currently empty, if you would like to wait there and monitor. For the rest of you, follow the instructions and place your devices in one of the Faraday storage lockers." I removed my digital genealogy amulet and checked my pockets for anything else. I found the overlay glasses I had used for the poker games and left them as well. Jess and Beatrice removed a few items each, and we all placed them into lockers that had opened for us. The Neokoros AI spoke again. "Now, please retrieve a cranial implant suppressor from the dispenser and place it over your head. You may then proceed into the scanners just ahead." I grabbed 3 of the items from the dispenser and handed one each to Jess and Beatrice. The administrator was already putting on one of its own. Each suppressor was a thin piece of headgear that resembled a sheer ski mask. I pulled mine down over my head and watched the others do the same. I smiled when I saw that the suppressor made us look like we were wearing nylon stockings over our heads. We looked ready to rob a bank. I noticed that Administrator Sabal's suppressor looked much better than ours, smaller and with a better customized fit. We must have gotten the generic version. Good. Now we are ready to go through the scanners. The suppressors will safely disable the function of any cranial nets or implants you may have. They will also disable smart irises if you have them, so you won't be able to alter your vision until the suppressor is removed. Omu had waited until we humans had entered the scanning devices and then left through a side door. After the scanners sniffed us and we were cleared for entry by Neokoros, we exited the chamber through another metallic door. Beyond were 2 airlock-type vestibule chambers. Each had a door that would not open until the one behind us was shut and sealed. M. Sabal pointed out the metallic wall paneling and the copper-covered door gaskets. It then explained that the chambers were not completely airtight, but were fully EM-proof. Beyond the last EM security vestibule was another large and busy chamber. There were dozens of humans moving about, each wearing a custom cranial suppressor. Some had wild or bizarre colorings. The workers were busy removing ESUs from large pallets and using carts to take them elsewhere. Others were unloading crates of processor blocks and data modules and sorting them into smaller groups. I noticed that although the room was lit using the same electrolume ceiling panels as were commonly used everywhere, there were also gas lantern-looking wall sconces hung periodically along the walls. The administrator had noticed my interest in the lamps and explained, "Since the electrical power is so unreliable, the lanterns provide our backup lights. Not just the lighting is redundant. Note the door operators and other moving objects. See the pneumatic backups? We can still open the doors using air pressure if the electricity is cut off. Our air handlers bringing in fresh air have pneumatic fan and blower backups also." "Why is the power so unreliable?" I asked. "Oh, it's reliable. It's just that intentionally cutting all electrical power is one of our safety protocols. We also rely on depowering all devices periodically to purge all systems in case something is hiding in the wiring. The experiments which become aware here can also become incredibly sneaky at times." "We can't be too careful," Administrator Sabal said. I got the look, again from Beatrice. "But even with the backup lanterns, here are a few glow sticks just in case." It handed each of us a few of the chemical bioluminescent glow sticks which we pocketed. Just then another team of humans passed by us pushing fully loaded trolleys. Each hopper looked to be full of used processor blocks and memory modules. The door they then exited through was simply labeled Destruction. M. Sabal noted my observation and explained, "We go through a lot of equipment here, John. Used or suspect processor blocks, data modules, and anything else with non-volatile memory is destroyed and replaced with new ones in between most experimental runs. We can't risk anything surviving the normal read-write erasure processes and making it out into the wider net. Sometimes we go so far as to even replace equipment that has only volatile memory if we can't trust the lack of power to have removed any lingering crud. So to be safe, we just melt everything down to base metal and bring in new equipment," it explained. The administrator then turned to Jess. "Your patient is in scan treatment room 2. Jess turned to Beatrice and me. "This should take less than 20 minutes. It is best if you remain out here. Can you show them the lattice while I'm busy, Kai?" "Certainly. We have nothing dangerous on the schedule for today, as we are currently exchanging some switches and lattice nodes. Follow me to the observation room, you two." M. Sabal first went to a wall recess and removed a small tablet-like object from a bundle of similar devices. Beatrice and I then followed the Herm as it left the room and headed down a long, narrow corridor. The passage was unlit and soon grew very dark. Ahead, the corridor had windows on each side and a bit of outside illumination was spilling in. When we reached the corridor section with the viewports, I joined Beatrice in looking outside. "Holy shit!" I heard Beatrice mutter as my own jaw dropped at what I was seeing. Outside the corridor on both sides was a vast, hemispheric domed, circular chamber. The corridor we were in was located high above the floor near the center of the dome. Hundreds of feet below us, the circular floor area must have been at least a half-mile in diameter. Despite the dimness, I could just make out that all of the floor space was covered with dense towers of processor blocks and memory module stacks. One small portion of the floor was currently lit by bright, portable construction lighting towers. I could see dozens of tiny human technicians working on the equipment down there. They must have been doing the replacement work the administrator had mentioned back in the previous room. I raised my gaze higher and saw the walls and ceiling of the dome were covered with metal panels. I reasoned this was to keep out, or more worryingly, keep in, any stray EM signals. M. Sabal just chuckled and walked past us saying, "You haven't seen anything yet. The best view is in the observation room just ahead. Come." Beatrice and I followed it down the long tubular corridor until we entered a large circular room. The room was also very dim, but it did have some lights. I saw that these were crystal emitters attached to thick bundles of optical fiber. The bundles left the room and headed back along the tunnel we had arrived in. "Yes, we have lights in the restricted chamber. The light is not emitted by electrical fixtures located in the chamber itself, though. Instead, it is produced outside and sent in via optical fiber. It's still rather dim, though, so be cautious descending the stairs," the Herm warned. The administrator led us to a circular stairwell in the middle of the round room, and we followed it down into what must have been the main observation room. It was right, this was an impressive view. The stairs had ended on a round crystal-clear platform-like floor, and the room's side walls were more crystal, which curved up from the floor to meet the ceiling. It was like standing in a round glass bowl. The view of the hundreds of acres of processors below us was incredible. Sabal moved over to a small, transparent work counter standing near the center of the room and opened the tablet it had brought along. It pulled out a fiber which extended from the table and connected it to a port on the tablet. When the device came on, I could see images and data appear on the tablet screen. One image showed the control area we had just left, and the second was of the work party down on the floor. Work team down on the floor in Gus sector, this is Administrator Sabal. The video image showed a human technician approaching. This is work team leader Jasper down in Gus sector. What can I do for you, Administrator? Hey team leader, I'm up in the observation bowl with a few VIP guests. I'd like to flash the array for them. How would that affect your current work and crew? There was a pause, and I could see the guy checking the time with an old-fashioned winding pocket watch. Well, it's near our break time. Give me a minute to tell the crew. I'll also turn off most of our work lights. We can eat our lunch by glow stick. Thank you, Jasper, the administrator said. It then tapped a few codes on the tablet. A new image appeared showing another busy-looking control room. This is Administrator Sabal in the observation bowl. Duty shift leader, please. A woman came into camera view. This is Zabel. What can I do for you, Kai? Z, I want to flash the array for a few VIP guests. Can you jack a single 5 megawatt ESU into the prime lattice inputs and place the cutoff under my control? Sabal asked. I can do that, Kai. Give me a few minutes, though. Please confirm null logic input in all registers, correct? Null logic input, affirmative Z. I will wait for your signal, the administrator replied. It then looked up to us. I'm going to send a bit of energy into the processor lattice. Each processor and memory block has small illuminators on their top sides. The energy will trip each block into the ready state. It will be a null test without any input logic, so there will be no danger. But it will still be quite spectacular to see from up here. I looked at Beatrice, and she was tense but did not say anything. The glass bowl we were in grew very dark as the work lights in G sector winked out below us. It was also now very dark in the entire half-mile chamber. I could just make out the tiny flicker of moving glow sticks at the work site. The tablet on the work counter continued to glow and illuminated Administrator Sabal's face with an eerie light as it waited. All set here, Kai. Second safety. Neochorus, please confirm null logic input in the registers? An off-screen synthetic voice said, Null logic input status in the registers confirmed. Sabal said, Third safety, I confirm null logic in the registers. Okay, on my mark, turn register lock keys. 3, 2, 1, turn. Good. Current register inputs are now locked out of any changes. All registers still read as null. Second safety, please confirm. There was a pause and we heard, Neochorus confirms all register inputs isolated and locked. Logic values remain null. Third safety confirms, all inputs locked and nulled. Awaiting ESU interlock release. A 10-second control window will suffice, Sabal said into her tablet. Another turn your key procedure followed. This second security protocol was for release control of the single 5 megawatt ESU which they had connected up to the array below us. When the procedure was completed, the administrator now possessed authority over a 10-second window to release the power or flash the array below us. Beatrice and John, pay attention to the room below. Here we go. 3, 2, 1, flash. It started in the center of the chamber directly below us. An explosion of emerald green light spreading rapidly outward. I also heard a faint audible thunk. The momentum of the spreading glow broke as some channels and pathways surged ahead while others lagged. At 200 yards out from the center, the mostly smooth green field of lights broke down into a fractal pattern of spreading green fire, which faded to nothing just short of the outer extent of the processor clusters a few hundred yards further. Finally, as the chamber turned dark again, I again heard the thunk noise. I was awed at the scale of the computing power I had witnessed below us. I looked at Beatrice. Her mouth hung open and her eyes were shining. Pretty cool, huh? Administrator Sabal said. The noises you heard at the beginning and end of the test were the nodal magnetic interlocks being closed to allow propagation. They are normally opened relays and require power to close and connect segments of the lattice. They are another of the redundant safeties. The fading fractal pattern at the end was the last energy reserves in the ESU being depleted. You should see it when we are doing full logic testing with dozens of gigawatt ESUs connected in parallel. Instead of green standby indicators, each processor block lights up in amber and reds as they fully activate and propagate complex sentient logic chains. Also, those light shows go on for tens of seconds, even almost a full minute in the case of one extremely long-duration, high-power test. Humans can't be in this room to watch those tests in person because of the EM danger, but we've recorded chemical film analog movies of the effect. I'll show them to you later. I was awed and a bit terrified. Administrator, each green light we just saw light up, that was like an empty brain, right? The administrator just looked at me and smiled. Not a single simple brain, John. Each light you just saw was the equivalent of your old friend the Master AI at the peak of its processing power. Although I would guess the Naomi AI has just as much capacity today. Holy Mother of God. I began to understand why Beatrice was so worried. I looked at the woman and saw that she looked as stunned as I was. How many lights did we just see? I asked very quietly. Well, this flash did not have enough power to fully trip them all, so maybe 300,000 or 400,000? If there had been more power, then all 565,000 processor blocks would have tripped. That did it. Beatrice and my minds were officially blown. We were unable to speak. After a bit, the Herm turned away to close out the demonstration. Thank you, Z. You can save all controls and take the depleted ESU offline and send it off for destruction. It punched in a new code. Thank you, Work Team Leader Jasper. The show's over. I'll quit bothering you and get out of your hair so your team can get back to work. No problem, Administrator. It was quite a show from down here on floor level, like a wall of green fire coming towards and sweeping past us. We loved it. The bright work lights in Sector G came on once again. Administrator Sabal unhooked the tablet device from the optical connector and directed us to climb the circular stairwell. As we exited the observation area, the administrator said, "That was just the brute force hardware portion of the project. The other work is not as exciting, and that's the work needed to safely decipher and interpret the test results. Let's head back to the lounge to wait for Jess to finish up. I'm sure you two have a few questions." We followed her up and back down the long access corridor. I was still too numb to speak. At the end of the corridor, just outside the door to the control room, M. Sabal tossed the control tablet into the disposal bin. Even for our safe flash test, all electronics which had been in the processing chamber were still destroyed for safety. After what I had just seen, I was glad for that abundance of caution.